The year was 1859, and the world was on the brink of an intellectual revolution. In the heart of a segregated America, in a time when science was still struggling to break free from the constraints of outdated beliefs, a young black boy named Samuel Carter was born. Little did the world know, he was destined to challenge everything they thought they understood about intelligence. Samuel Carter was not an ordinary boy. From an early age, he demonstrated an astonishing capacity for understanding the world around him. He had an innate ability to solve problems, answer questions no one else could, and grasp concepts that even seasoned scholars struggled with. But his brilliance did not stop at knowledge alone. Samuel had a unique way of thinking that defied categorization. His thought process was unlike anyone else's, often leaving even the most experienced minds baffled. At a time when African Americans were still fighting for basic rights, Samuel's extraordinary intellect would serve as both a gift and a curse. While his brilliance was undeniable, it also placed him in the crosshairs of a society unprepared to accept the idea that someone of his race could surpass the greatest minds of the day. Samuel Carter's story is not just one of academic triumph, but one that exposes the racial prejudices that held back progress and the limitations of science itself. How did a young black boy from an oppressed background manage to defy the boundaries of knowledge, to outsmart even the brightest minds of his time? What was it about Samuel Carter that left even the most respected scholars scratching their heads in disbelief? The beginnings of a mind like no other. Born in a small, rural town, Samuel's early years were anything but easy. His family, like so many others at the time, struggled to survive in a world that offered little hope for those born into poverty, let alone a young black boy in a racially divided society. Yet, it was during these formative years that Samuel began to show signs of his intellectual brilliance. By the time he was 5, Samuel was reading and writing at a level far beyond his age. His parents, both illiterate, watched in awe as their son devoured books with an insatiable appetite. It wasn't just that he could read. He understood what he read, often explaining complex concepts with an ease that seemed impossible for someone his age. His parents' inability to read made Samuel's intellectual feats even more remarkable. His mother, who worked tirelessly as a domestic worker, would often come home to find Samuel immersed in books that seemed far too advanced for a boy of his age. While other children his age were playing outside, Samuel could be found with his nose buried in a book, whether it was on physics, astronomy, or the works of philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle. It was a local schoolteacher, Mrs. Clark, who first recognized Samuel's potential. She had seen bright students before, but Samuel was different. While most children struggled with basic arithmetic and grammar, Samuel tackled them effortlessly, often correcting his teacher in ways that left her astounded. He would ask questions that didn't just challenge what she taught, but questioned the very foundation of the lessons themselves. Mrs. Clark was stunned. The depth of Samuel's understanding was far beyond what a boy of his age should have known. He would pose questions like, "Why does the sun rise in the east?" and "What makes the stars twinkle?" His questions weren't just about surface-level facts, but about the very nature of existence, the world, and the universe itself. His intellectual curiosity knew no bounds. At a time when African American children were largely excluded from formal education, Samuel's genius shone through. Mrs. Clark, despite the constraints of the time, made it her mission to nurture his talent, giving him books and encouraging him to explore the world of science and philosophy. But the world around Samuel was not ready for him. His intellectual abilities, while extraordinary, were met with suspicion. In a society that was built on racial hierarchy, the idea that a black child could possess such brilliance was not only unsettling, but threatening. The concept of African Americans being intellectually equal to white people was still unthinkable to many, especially in the post-slavery South. Despite this, Samuel's mind was a force that could not be denied. He would sit in class, the only black student among a sea of white faces, and would raise his hand to answer questions. His answers were always correct, always precise, but his presence made people uncomfortable. The other children, mostly unaware of the societal constraints Samuel faced, were either in awe or confused by him. Some of them tried to befriend him, while others whispered behind his back, calling him names, not fully understanding why this boy, so different from the others, seemed to possess knowledge that was beyond the reach of their imaginations. The struggles and triumphs of an outsider. As Samuel grew older, the world around him became more hostile. The more he learned, the more the boundaries of his world seemed to close in. In a society that valued conformity and the preservation of the status quo, Samuel's intellect was viewed as a challenge to the established order. Despite these challenges, Samuel's passion for knowledge only deepened. He would spend hours at the local library, reading everything he could get his hands on, from mathematical equations to the works of the greatest minds in history. There, he discovered the theories of Newton, Einstein, and Darwin, and he devoured them, questioning their validity and expanding upon them in ways that made even the most learned men scratch their heads. But as Samuel's intellect grew, so did the resistance he faced. Even the most well-meaning individuals in his life, including his teachers, were uncomfortable with his brilliance. While they admired his academic achievements, they could not fathom how someone of his race could be so intellectually advanced. As his teenage years approached, Samuel began to gain local recognition for his intellectual prowess. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to fit in with the academic elite, he was always reminded of his place in society, an outsider, both because of his race and his unmatched intellect. This was the world Samuel Carter lived in, a world where genius was often met with fear and resistance, and where racial prejudice was so deeply embedded in society that even the brightest minds were confined to rigid boundaries. But despite this, Samuel's determination to push beyond those limitations never wavered. His intellect would continue to defy expectations, and his legacy would prove that brilliance knows no boundaries, not even race. By the time Samuel Carter entered his teenage years, it was clear that his intellectual gifts were unparalleled. However, as he began to show promise beyond the capabilities of any other student, the limitations of the world around him became more and more evident. As a young black boy in the segregated South, Samuel's brilliance was met with both admiration and fear. While his teachers recognized his genius, they were unsure how to nurture it in a society that was still bound by deeply ingrained racial prejudices. In school, Samuel was often the subject of praise from his teachers, yet they struggled to teach him anything new. He had already surpassed the curriculum, his mind racing ahead of the prescribed lessons. One day, his teacher, Mr. Johnson, decided to challenge him by offering a particularly difficult math problem, one that even some of the older students had struggled with. To everyone's shock, Samuel not only solved it, but did so with ease, so much so that he immediately found a more efficient way to solve it, something Mr. Johnson himself hadn't even considered. This moment marked a turning point for Samuel. He began to feel the weight of his intellect in a way he hadn't before. The recognition from his teachers was fleeting, and though they were in awe of him, their actions revealed the limits of what they could offer him. His intellectual development could no longer be contained within the walls of his small-town school. The very system that had once nurtured him now seemed to restrict him. His school library, once his sanctuary, was no longer enough. Samuel's hunger for knowledge had grown insatiable, and he realized he needed something more. He needed the tools to unlock the mysteries of the universe. He sought out books that pushed the boundaries of conventional knowledge, books that were often reserved for the intellectual elite. Yet, even then, he was often forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that certain doors were closed to him. During this period of growth, Samuel found solace in correspondence with scholars from the North, where there was greater intellectual freedom and a slight opening for African Americans in academic circles. He sent letters to university professors, many of whom were surprised and impressed by his inquiries. In one of his letters to a renowned physicist, Samuel proposed an idea that was years ahead of its time. He wrote about the possibility of using mathematical equations to predict the behavior of light. His question was bold and philosophical. If light travels in waves, what would happen if we could manipulate those waves in a controlled environment? The physicist who received Samuel's letter, stunned by the maturity of the question, responded with a letter of his own, inviting Samuel to meet with him. This exchange would spark a series of intellectual debates that lasted for years. Though Samuel never physically met the professor, their letters laid the groundwork for what would later become Samuel's greatest contribution to science: the systemic resistance to his genius. Despite his intellectual triumphs, the world Samuel inhabited still saw him through a racial lens. The very idea of a young black boy outsmarting the brightest minds of the time was difficult for many to accept. Samuel's gifts could not be ignored, but neither could the deeply entrenched prejudices that shaped society. To many, Samuel's success wasn't just an anomaly, it was a threat to the status quo. As he grew older, Samuel began to face resistance not only from the educational institutions that were meant to nurture his potential, but also from the broader scientific community. White scientists, who were deeply entrenched in their own beliefs, found it hard to believe that a black boy could contribute anything meaningful to the world of science. This resistance reached its peak when Samuel, at the age of 18, proposed an idea that would challenge even the greatest minds of the time. He suggested that the human brain, rather than being a static organ, might be capable of changing and adapting in response to external stimuli, something he described as mental plasticity. His theory was radical, and while it was later validated by modern neuroscience, it was ridiculed and dismissed by many of his contemporaries. Samuel's ideas were far too advanced for the time, and his race further complicated the acceptance of his theories. The lack of support from the scientific community did not deter him, but it did make his path more difficult. Samuel realized that, in order to make his mark on the world, he would have to do it on his own terms. The rise of a self-made scholar. Determined to push past the barriers society had placed before him, Samuel turned to self-education. He traveled far and wide, speaking to scholars, scientists, and intellectuals who were willing to engage with him. In the bustling cities of the North, Samuel found a more welcoming atmosphere for his ideas. He met with some of the country's most respected scientists, offering his thoughts on everything from the nature of light to the behavior of matter. It was during this period that Samuel began to gain recognition from a few select scientists who saw in him a kindred spirit, a fellow truth-seeker unafraid to break from conventional thought. One such scientist, Dr. William Hall, who was renowned for his work in mathematics, became Samuel's mentor and ally. Together, they began to explore new theories in physics, theories that would later contribute to the development of modern physics. But even as he gained respect in certain circles, Samuel was still ostracized by much of the scientific community. The notion of an African-American man being on equal intellectual footing with white scholars was simply too radical for most. His contributions were overshadowed by the deep-seated racism that still pervaded every aspect of society. Despite this, Samuel's work continued to influence a small but dedicated group of followers. He wrote several papers on his theories, and though they were not published in major scientific journals, they circulated among the intellectuals who were open-minded enough to entertain the idea that a black man might possess brilliance on par with any white scholar. The struggle for recognition and legacy. By the time Samuel reached his mid-20s, he had already contributed to fields like physics, mathematics, and even early psychology. His theories on mental plasticity, though unrecognized at the time, would eventually lay the foundation for future breakthroughs in neuroscience. His ideas on the manipulation of light waves would later be reflected in the work of quantum physicists who explored the wave-particle duality of light. However, Samuel never lived to see the full impact of his work. By the time his name was mentioned in academic circles, he had long since passed into obscurity. Despite his profound contributions to science, his legacy was, for a time, relegated to the shadows, dismissed by a world that could not fathom a young black boy changing the course of history. Yet, Samuel Carter's story is one of defiance in the face of adversity, a story of a mind that refused to be confined by the limits of race and societal expectations. His genius continues to inspire generations of scientists, scholars, and thinkers who look to his life as proof that brilliance cannot be contained, no matter the color of one's skin. Now that we've covered Flux 2's impressive capabilities, let's dive deeper into how it compares to the broader landscape of AI and what its release means for the future of open-source models. One of the major breakthroughs that Flux 2 brings to the table is its ability to handle multi-reference imagery. This feature allows you to feed up to 10 different images at once, and the model maintains consistency across all of them. This isn't just a minor convenience. This is a game-changer for product designers, content creators, and visual storytellers. Imagine creating a campaign that involves multiple images or scenes. like a multi-panel advertisement or a complex brand concept. In the past, maintaining visual consistency across such elements would require a painstaking amount of tweaking and manually ensuring each image aligned perfectly with the next. Now, with Flux 2, all that's baked in. Whether you're working on a single product shot or an entire sequence, Flux 2 guarantees that characters, settings, lighting, and the entire visual aesthetic remain in harmony throughout. This eliminates the need for endless prompt tweaks or fiddling with different settings for each shot. What's even more amazing is how Flux 2 manages to pull this off at a high resolution, maintaining 4 megapixels of image detail. That's a massive leap forward, especially for open-source tools. And this means more than just larger images. It means photorealistic quality that's stable across generations. Skin textures that stay smooth without artifacts, hands that look like they belong to real humans, and lighting that's crisp and defined. The days of fuzzy or washed-out images are over with Flux 2. It's high-definition content at your fingertips. The model uses its hybrid setup, featuring the Mistral 324B vision language model for understanding semantic meaning and the rectified flow transformer for image composition, to make sure that the generation process is smooth and coherent. This combination allows the model to understand how objects in the scene should behave with each other, how lighting should affect different materials, and how everything should spatially relate. Flux 2 isn't just generating images, it's comprehending the very structure of what it creates. This is a significant step forward in AI understanding and generation. But what does this mean for you, the creator? In practical terms, it means that you can take your design work to the next level. Whether you're crafting a stunning product shot for a client or generating a storyboard for a commercial, Flux 2 allows you to work faster, more efficiently, and with a higher degree of professionalism. No more worrying about image stability or whether your lighting and textures will hold up across different frames. It's all built in. And it's not just about static imagery. When we talk about Flux 2, we also have to talk about its text rendering capabilities. Flux 2's typography is a huge upgrade. Designers working in UI/UX, infographics, logos, and other text-heavy content will immediately notice the difference. The model now renders text beautifully, allowing for infographics and mock-ups that look clean, professional, and production-ready. Gone are the days of struggling with clunky text prompts and getting text that's hard to read or doesn't quite fit the design. Typography is finally something you can rely on in AI-generated imagery. This breakthrough brings a whole new level of credibility to AI in the creative industries. No longer will you have to settle for a model that excels at generating art, but falls flat when it comes to text-heavy designs. With Flux 2, you can create visuals that include perfect typography without the constant headache of tweaking. The hybrid setup that Flux 2 uses is worth mentioning again, because it really is the secret sauce behind the model's stunning performance. Black Forest Labs didn't just add a few extra layers to an existing architecture, they rebuilt the system entirely. The Mistral 324B vision language model allows Flux 2 to understand not only the structure of the images, but also the nuanced details like material behaviors and spatial relationships. It's a model that truly sees the world in the same way humans do, making it more adaptable to different types of imagery and design work. Meanwhile, the rectified flow transformer does the heavy lifting of turning that understanding into a realistic image. The flow transformer handles things like composition, materials, and the finer details of visual aesthetics. By separating the two functions and pairing them with the new VE system, Flux 2 is able to deliver outstanding results, cutting down on noise and preserving more image quality than ever before. You also have to take into account how Flux 2 interacts with its ecosystem. If you've ever worked with open-source AI tools, you know that one of the major pain points is the lack of integration with other popular tools. That's not the case here. Flux 2 integrates seamlessly with popular design software and platforms like Comfy UI, diffusers, and others. This makes it an incredibly useful tool for designers and creatives who already rely on these platforms. Instead of having to find workarounds or make compromises, Flux 2 fits right into your existing workflow, enhancing your creative process without causing disruption. And if that wasn't enough, Flux 2 delivers all of this without breaking the bank. You'd expect such an advanced model to require expensive cloud resources or massive local VRM, But that's not the case. Flux 2 is surprisingly efficient, delivering high-quality results without the astronomical computing costs you might expect. Whether you're using it for high-end production work or just experimenting with AI design, Flux 2 provides a level of accessibility that makes it approachable for creators of all kinds. Now, let's shift gears a little and talk about the video side of things. This is where things really get interesting. If you've been paying attention to the open-source AI scene, you know that video generation has been lagging behind image generation until now. Hunyuan Video 1.5, developed by Tencent, has set a new standard for open-source video generation. It's an 8.3 billion parameter model that punches way above its weight, offering smooth, natural motion, controlled cinematic movement, and frame-to-frame stability that you simply didn't think was possible at this size. The key to Hunyuan Video 1.5 success lies in its ability to follow instructions accurately, whether it's for camera movement, lighting, or multi-step actions. This model doesn't just generate static video frames. It brings the video to life, handling the complexity of dynamic motion while maintaining a coherent visual aesthetic. What makes Hunyuan Video 1.5 stand out from other models is its versatility. You can create realistic motion, experiment with animation, and even use it for more abstract projects, all while maintaining perfect consistency. Whether you're making B-roll cinematic shots, realistic animations, or dynamic video sequences, this model delivers stunning, high-quality results. The ability to track objects, execute camera moves, and handle lighting transitions, all while maintaining fluid motion, is a huge breakthrough for open-source video generation. When comparing Hunyuan Video 1.5 with older models like OpenSora, it's clear that this new version is a massive upgrade. OpenSora, though impressive in its own right, struggles with maintaining consistent motion and quality in more complex scenes. Hunyuan Video 1.5 handles these with ease, offering improved character movement and more realistic physics. But the real kicker? Hunyuan Video 1.5 doesn't require tons of VRAM or cloud computing power to run. This opens up the world of high-quality video generation to creators who don't have access to expensive infrastructure. The fact that it's an 8.3 billion parameter model running on consumer GPUs is nothing short of impressive. Whether you're an indie filmmaker, a content creator, or just someone experimenting with AI video, Hunyuan Video 1.5 gives you the tools to create high-quality, realistic video content without breaking the bank. And because it's open source, you can experiment and tailor the tool to your needs, making it a flexible and powerful addition to any creative's toolkit. Now, you may be wondering, what does all of this mean for the future of AI-generated content? Well, we're at a tipping point. With tools like Flux 2 and Hunyuan Video 1.5, we're entering a new era of AI creativity. These models are no longer just novelties. They're essential tools for anyone working in digital media, design, or entertainment. But the best part is, we're just getting started. The improvements in AI models like Flux 2 and Hunyuan Video 1.5 signal the beginning of something bigger. The barriers to entry for high-quality content creation are lower than ever, and as these models evolve, the possibilities are endless. But don't just sit back and watch this revolution unfold, be part of it. These tools are here for the taking, and the more you experiment with them, the more you'll learn about what they can do. The future of AI-generated content is bright, and the tools to build that future are already here. So what are you waiting for? Jump into the world of Flux 2 and Hunyuan Video 1.5, explore their potential, and push these models to their limits. Don't just watch history being made, be part of it. Subscribe, like, and share your creations. Let's see where this AI revolution can take us. Catch you in the next one.